What is up? Thank you for being here. We are gonna dive into a fitness and nutrition Q&A. These are all questions that came from Instagram. So if you're not following me on Instagram, make sure you head over there at Cody McBroom. We'll link that in the description as well because I answer a ton more questions there. So once again, head over to Instagram so you can give me your questions and you can be on the next Q&A. So let's get into it. First question is from Uncommonly Pam. How to go back to maintenance after being in a deficit for a year and a half. So this one is hard because it truly depends on your symptoms. A year and a half of dieting looks very different for multiple people. A year and a half of under eating 7 days a week in aspirations of getting leaner and having a high stress lifestyle and training really hard looks completely different than a year and a half of quote unquote dieting when every single weekend you're actually falling off and eating way overboard. So maybe for some individuals, under eating actually looks like under eating Monday through Friday and then binging or overeating on Saturday and Sunday, which looks pretty similar to a 5-2 calorie cycling approach, which has been studied by Dr. Bill Campbell, where we have 5 deficit days and 2 refeed days. Now, in the study, and when you're using a 5-2 macro ratio principle throughout the week, it's much more methodical and planned out. So it's not a binge, it's a purposeful overeating or even just eating at maintenance to improve recovery, muscular endurance, potentially metabolic adaptation, and just blunt that effect. But we know it's not as much as we thought before. But point being, it can be 2 different things. So if you're truly under eating, if you were truly under eating for a year and a half, you're gonna have a ton of symptoms from that. You're gonna have poor sleep. You're gonna have not been progressing in the gym whatsoever. If at all, just a little bit. You might even have some thyroid dysfunction, which if you're a female or male, but if female, it's more likely you might see thinning of hair falling out, nails very brittle or cracking, your skin isn't as good, and your cuts don't heal as quickly. You're gonna be noticing irritability, that tired and wired feeling where you're tired all day, but you're wired at night and can't sleep. There's all these different symptoms that we know are present when your metabolism is really decreasing and your thyroid is taking a hit. And if you were truly under eating for a year and a half, you were gonna see those symptoms. So point A, if you see any of those symptoms at a severe level or you're extremely lean, like I'm talking about, you just did a physique show or you have an eating disorder and you are extremely low in body fat levels, you should take a more aggressive approach to getting to your maintenance. So yes, you've been in a deficit for a year and a half. And if you truly were, you're probably hurting and you need to get your calories up. This is where we use a recovery diet instead of a reverse diet. I wanna get your calories up as close to your new maintenance as possible. So once upon a time, if it was 2,000, but now it's 1,500, we're gonna drive you right up to 1,500. And if you don't know where that's at, you're just gonna shoot for somewhere in between where you're at now and where your old maintenance was before. And you're truly just tracking sleep, hunger, cravings, mood, performance, stress, all these different things, motivation. We wanna see these symptoms improve. So the worse the symptoms get or the lower your body fat is, the faster you need to reverse to get rid of those symptoms and start improving your health. And the less symptoms you have, which is probably likely for the weekend warrior scenario where you were in a deficit, but really you were overeating on the weekends, you had a lot of social events, you weren't truly in a deficit week after week, day after day, the whole year, year and a half plus. And in that scenario, you can take a slower process. Slowly work your calories up by adjusting by 5 to 15% per week, usually with carbs, but fat as well if you're not eating enough fat, protein as well if you're not eating enough protein, and getting your calories to a good place where you just feel better, and you do it slowly enough to where you stay pretty lean in the process, or as lean as you possibly can until you find that maintenance. That's how I would approach going to maintenance after a year and a half of dieting if you were truly in a deficit that whole time. Second question is from Snacks and Squats. Hit a plateau. Should I go back into a lower deficit or reverse up more? Both are below true maintenance. Very similar to this scenario, but this will be a little bit easier to go through. If you hit a plateau, that lets me believe that you were in a deficit and you were losing weight, because you can't hit a plateau if you weren't already progressing. So if you've been dieting for anywhere less than 8 weeks and you hit a plateau, most likely I'm gonna tell you to push further. Create a bigger deficit, do more cardio, eat less food, do something to increase energy expenditure and decrease caloric intake. So to make a bigger deficit of your calories and just keep going. This is just where the grind begins. If you hit a plateau, you just adjust. Now, if you've been dieting for 12, 16 plus weeks and you've already made multiple adjustments, you've broken through multiple plateaus and you're getting closer to that end range of your leanness, let's say you only have a few pounds to lose. In that scenario, I'd probably take a longer diet break, say at least 2 weeks, if not 4 to 8 weeks of eating at maintenance, and just get out of the diet for a while, let your body kind of recover, be more social, train really hard, get good sleep, and then jump back into the deficit. In that scenario, you don't need to reverse up because you're going to maintenance for a short period of time, your new maintenance, and then you're gonna jump right back into the deficit. There's no point in going through a reverse, because if we slowly reverse our calories up until we get to maintenance and then we hang out here for a while, not only is that a longer timeline, but you have 1 to 2 months of reversing, which is just dragging along that deficit. I'd rather just get you to the maintenance, spend 2 months there, and then jump back into the deficit for another 3 months and get to the end goal. But that's only if you're in a good place and you don't want to drive your calories down any further. You've been at it for a while, but you do still feel good and you know you can squeeze out more. Take a diet break for a while, jump back into it. And if you're in the prior situation where you just haven't done it long enough, you need to spend more time in the deficit. A good fat loss phase is going to be anywhere between 12 to 24 weeks long. Next we have that's_really_my_name. Better growth from concentric or eccentric movement? This is a really good question. Studies used to talk a lot about eccentric movements being better for muscle growth, the negative phase. So on a bench press, this is where I'm lowering the bar very slowly. And the reason they thought this was better for muscle growth is because we see more muscle damage there, and they used to link muscle damage to muscle growth. Now we just know it's correlated, right? So muscle damage, breaking down the muscle, doesn't literally create muscle growth. It's just part of the process in getting to muscle growth. So if you're training hard enough to be progressive and maximally stimulative to your muscles to get them to grow, you're gonna see muscle damage in the process. So it's a correlation, not necessarily a causation, right? It's a good proxy to know that you're doing enough work to get to the end result. And therefore, I don't think that it is the most important thing for building muscle. However, I don't really think a concentric phase is the most important thing either, because to maximally stimulate muscle growth and grow your muscles and create enough stress to adapt from to build them, you need the full stretch shortening cycle, which means I'm gonna stretch the muscle by going through the negative, and then I'm gonna shorten the muscle by going through the positive, or the eccentric and concentric. And when I do this, the muscle fibers are literally pulling apart and coming together, creating a stretch reflex. They're creating the stretch and shorten cycle, which is the full cycle for a full range of motion that the muscle should go through in order to create a maximally stimulative adaptation, right? We want that adaptation to grow. So I don't think you can choose either one, right? Concentrics have the benefits of that's where the peak contraction is, that's where we create maximal tension on most movements. Some movements it's in the eccentric, for others it's in the top end concentric, like a leg extension where we're contracting the muscle. So we can kind of go back and forth with this, right? Concentric produces more metabolites and lactic acid, and that accumulating over time leads to muscle growth. But the eccentric creates a bigger stretch, and we know that the stretch implies muscle growth itself, and both bring in blood flow. So we can kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I think we need both of them equally, and I think there's points in time throughout the training session and points in times throughout different exercises, and why you would choose different exercises in order to maximize either one of those things, right? We want to choose certain exercises to maximize the stretch and the negative, and we want to choose certain exercises to maximize the contraction and the shortening of that movement. So you can't pick. That is a question that you just can't say for sure. All right, next question is from Rapanaya. Probably pronounced that wrong. If calorie deficit equals weight loss, why do trainers have you increase calories in a program? It's actually a really good question. There's a lot of times where people start a diet and the first thing the nutritionist does is increase your calories, right? We immediately bump up your calories because you're not eating enough. Why is that? There's a few reasons. Number one, food is thermic, right? Food is fuel. So if somebody's under fueling themselves, they're probably under expending energy. And what I mean by that is a classic example of this would actually be a reverse diet client that we would call a hyper responder. They go into a reverse diet and they lose weight. They get leaner during a reverse. Why is that? Well, it's because when we increase calories, they take more steps throughout the day. They move more when they talk. They fidget more throughout the day. They're standing up more instead of sitting down. They push themselves a little bit harder in the gym. They're sleeping better. So when we accumulate all these things that are going to literally lead to more activity and a higher BMR, a basal metabolic rate, our metabolism increases, our maintenance caloric intake increases, and our energy expenditure increases. And that leads to burning more calories day to day despite eating more. So a lot of times we can get more fuel burned if we give you more food, and that's a good way to create a baseline before jumping into diet. The other thing is that a lot of people aren't consistent. So if I have somebody come in and I look through their food log and they say they're eating 1,200 calories, I am pretty good at knowing this after about 10 plus years of doing this as a coach. I know when you're not really eating 1,200 calories. I know when your food logs aren't 100% accurate. I know when you're mistracking something or when something's probably being left out, because I know the right questions to ask an individual, and I know the signs and the red flags to look for when looking at a tracker or a MyFitnessPal food log, for example. And if I get these red flags, intuitive signals to myself that they're probably not actually consuming what they think they are, I'm immediately gonna bring up their calories, but truthfully, I'm not, right? Logically speaking, we're eating about the same. I'm just showing you how to do it better. And when you see the number is higher than your previous number that you thought was accurate, it seems as though you're eating more food. And if we fill that with whole foods, high fiber, high protein, veggies, fruits, all those things. It's more voluminous too, because those foods have less calories per gram, which means that you seem like you're eating more food, but really you're not. So this combination of inaccuracy before the diet starts, and this thermic effect, and this priming idea that we've really talked a lot about and used in our practice at Tailored Coaching Method, of getting your body ready to diet. If I prime your body, I prime your metabolism, I get you feeling better, your health is there, your performance is there, your recovery is there, your sleep is there. All these biofeedback markers are 100% positive because I'm giving you more fuel and I'm developing a level of adherence and consistency with you that's higher than normal because you're not in a deficit, because we know it's harder when you're in a deficit. I've primed you for the perfect place to start a diet. So a lot of times when a coach, a good coach, puts you on more calories before the diet begins, it's to get you prepared for the diet ahead. It's to make sure that you're accurately eating the right foods in the right portions and having the right selections of foods. And it's because there's a thermic effect associated that leads to a better energy expenditure day to day due to eating more food. Should have known better that we can't do this in 10 minutes or less. All right, we will get to a couple more. This is a good one. Maria.Bearson. Best advice for someone that's considering pursuing coaching full-time. This one, it's a patience, it's a long game, right? You have to play the patience card. You have to just play for the long game. So my best advice for anybody who wants to be a coach, number one, hire a coach, get coached. Because if you don't know what it's like to get coached, you will never truly understand what it's like to be in the client's shoes, who you will be coaching soon. I think you need to go get certified by somebody like NASM or PN or MNU or whoever, just these general certifications to legally certify you as a trainer or a nutrition coach. And then from there, I think you should dive into specialty courses, textbooks, seminars, things like that, where you're diving into more of the art of coaching and program design and programming diets and the science behind macros and refeeds and high carbs versus low carbs, all these different things. It's really important to go beyond the general certification that just make you legally a coach, because that's really where you learn. So between getting the right certifications, going through the right courses, networking at those courses as much as possible, and making sure that you hire a coach so you can put yourself in the client's shoes, it ultimately comes down to experience. And that experience is gonna come from training other people, working with other people, doing things for free, creating content, blogs, videos, podcasts, Instagram posts, infographics, anything you can do to take a topic that you're studying and articulate it into a smaller, more simple to understand piece of content for the average person who doesn't know this stuff like you do to consume. Because when you take that topic and you boil it down into a way that they can better understand, they are going to learn from you, and if you can teach them, you better ingrain it in yourself. So I think it's a patience game. I think you gotta create a lot of content, you gotta get the right certifications and go to these specialty courses as much as you can, network as much as possible, and last but not least, put yourself in the client's shoes. Experience what you are trying to eventually sell. I personally, for the last 10 years, have always had at least one coach, if not multiple coaches, in my corner for different areas of life, and it's because I wanna experience what coaching is like from the client's perspective. We're gonna do one more question. Not gonna get through them all. All right, last question is from Bigly Smalls. Strength testing, 1RM versus sub-max weight AMRAP. Also, what's your preferred 1RM formula? So I don't have a preferred 1RM formula. They're just a bunch of calculators online. So basically the formula is go max out, see what your 100% max weight is, or go to like a 90, 95% and then add a little bit because you know that you could go a little bit further. And then just Google search 1RM formula. There's a million calculators out there. Even if you did a 3-rep max, punch in your 3-rep and it'll tell you your 1-rep. But I'm not a huge fan of percentage-based training. I think auto-regulated training with an RPE or an RIR scale is better, rate of perceived exertion, reps in reserve, because it allows you to auto-regulate that based on any given day. If I go in and I'm supposed to hit 80% of my 1-rep max for 5 reps, but I feel like shit, I slept like shit, I didn't eat well, I'm not gonna train super well, and if I do what's on the paper, I'm probably gonna get hurt. But rather, that 80% is trying to create a level of intensity and effort to stimulate some kind of response in me. And knowing that, I know that that's pretty equivalent to doing 5 sets of 5 at an RPE 8. But maybe that RPE 8 for me today is actually like 65 or 70% of my 1RM because I'm just having a shitty training session. You need to have those things taken into consideration. I think they're way better, they're more useful, they're safer. So I don't typically use these, but if I am going to use anything, I do like to use a 3-rep max or an AMRAP test. The AMRAP test, you can take something like an 8RM, like an estimated 8RM, and you just do it as many reps as you can. It doesn't really matter if it's a 6RM, an 8RM, a 10RM. It doesn't matter if you get 10, 12, 20, 50 reps. All that matters is that you keep that weight the same and then you try to approach the same thing in the future. In my opinion, an 8RM is a good middle ground that I think you should strive for. You put that on the bar, do as many reps as you can, and that's a good test to come back to see if you've built muscle, you've built strength and endurance, and you can keep using that same weight to see if you can outperform your previous. Now, if you're doing 30, 40, 50 reps on something, you just went too light, because that's in a completely different strength range that isn't as applicable to hypertrophy or strength specifically, so you're not gonna get the same result you're after. The other thing you can do is a 1 to 3 rep max, just to figure out where your 1 rep max is. And more importantly than that, I actually think it's to show you what true failure means. You can't use an RPE or an RIR scale properly if you've never failed. If you've never tried to do 8 reps and had to drop the bar when deadlifting, or try to go for a 1 rep max attempt and fail with the bar on your chest and somebody has to help you up, you don't know what it's like to truly reach failure. And if you don't know what it's like to truly reach failure, you don't know how to accurately use an RPE or RIR scale, which is one of the most useful tools in training program design. So I think you should do it without hurting yourself, so you can safely articulate and gauge your intensity going forward. You will get much better results because of it. All right, thank you for being here and watching that. That went a little bit longer than 10 minutes. I should have known better. I do not do rapid fire ever, because I have to go deep into each question, but I hope you liked that. If you did, make sure you like the video. Comment below if you have any questions on anything I discussed today, or if you have a question for a future video. I want to answer your questions. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We're going to be putting out a lot more content here. We have our other channels linked in the description as well. And last but not least, hit the little red bell button if you want to get notified every time we release new content. I'll catch you next time.